Hey everybody, my name is Daniel, and I'm here to teach you how Rotten Tomatoes works. So I was on Twitter the other day, and some guy was complaining about Ad Astra's Rotten Tomatoes score, and how since the critics rated it favorably and the audience didn't, that the critics were, quote, on their ivory towers, elitist, blah blah blah. And what made me laugh was the multitude of people that came out against this guy like, look, Rotten Tomatoes doesn't work like that, you don't know what you're talking about, shut up. But it also made me think, well, what about the people that are gonna look at that tweet and don't know how Rotten Tomatoes works? So hopefully by answering the following 5 questions, I'll be able to build a little guide for people that don't know how Rotten Tomatoes works and really don't know how to approach it. So, first question, what is Rotten Tomatoes? Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregator website where they gather movie reviews from all over the internet and put them on their platform. They basically host them. They also have curators who read reviews, watch videos, look at them, and basically determine whether that reviewer thought the movie was good or rated positive or negative or bad. And what they'll do is just collect all that information and based on the law of averages, give it either that fresh tomato or the rotten splat. Number 2, what does it mean for a movie to be fresh or rotten? In order for a movie to be fresh, the percentage of critics' reviews that are favorable or positive have to be 60% or higher. If it's 59% or lower, the movie is considered rotten. Now, where you can come into some trouble is that people will kind of equate a really high Rotten Tomatoes score to like a score on a test. For example, we'll look at Monsters University, which has an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. But if you click on more info, you'll find that the average rating for the movie is a little less than a 7 out of 10. So just because it's at an 80% doesn't mean it's the greatest movie in the world. It just means that 80% of the critics that reviewed it for Rotten Tomatoes thought the movie was good. As a different example, let's look at the newest Lion King from this year. This movie has a 53% on Rotten Tomatoes, but if you look at the more info, the rating out of 10 is a 6. So in terms of how good the movie is, Rotten Tomatoes has that listed not that far off from Monsters University. It's just that of the critics that saw Lion King, a smaller percentage of them liked the movie than those who liked Monsters University. The Tomatometer simply answers the question, is the movie good? It does not answer how good the movie is. Number 3, who are these critics? These can be anybody from journalists to bloggers to video makers to podcasters. Anybody who fits Rotten Tomatoes criteria can be a Tomatometer approved critic. And usually the metric is you have to be working consistently for at least 2 years, and you either have to be working for a substantially influential publication, or you have to have a good sizable following. So if you're looking for journalists, you have people from the New York Times, Vanity Fair, IndieWire, the Chicago Tribune, Dallas Morning News, big publications. You can also have people working in your local town. The film critic for my local newspaper is on Rotten Tomatoes. So you don't have to be from New York or LA and live, a fart's blow away from a movie star. You can be in any part of America, work for a good publication, and be featured on Rotten Tomatoes. If you're a YouTuber, not only do you have to be working for the minimum 2 years, but you also have to have at least 30,000 subscribers. So guys like Chris Stuckman and Sean Chandler, even though they don't work for people like the New York Times, because they've got such a sizable internet following and they've been consistently uploading videos for at least 2 years, they're able to be eligible for Rotten Tomatoes approval. Number 4, and this is a really important one, why should I care? Rotten Tomatoes is the new thumbs up, thumbs down. It is an easily digestible way for people to figure out what other people think about the movies. If someone goes on Rotten Tomatoes and they see a splat next to a movie that they wanted to see, they might feel less willing to go to the theaters, spend the money, and see that movie because the people that have already seen it are basically saying it's not that great. I do it all the time. I did it for Lucy in the Sky, researching this video. Now, a movie which the trailer kind of intrigued me, hearing all the bad buzz about it, I'm not really wanting to go out and spend my $8. I'd rather just wait for rental or Netflix. Imagine that interaction multiplied by millions. That's people that don't go to see the movie, that affects a movie's box office, and that tells the studio that, yeah, people don't want to see this type of movie. So making other types of movies that are similar, it's gonna get a lot harder for those films to be made. It's a trickle-down effect that can affect the industry. I'm not saying that Rotten Tomatoes is the be-all, end-all of box office performance. Believe me, the Transformers movies are severely rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, and those suckers made money. But I'm saying it does have an effect. If you're interested in movies at all, if you're interested in box office, if you want to see a movie that you really like succeed, Rotten Tomatoes is a factor that you can take into consideration when talking about a movie's performance as a whole. And number 5, the last one. How should I use Rotten Tomatoes? I think Rotten Tomatoes is like Wikipedia. If you're trying to write an essay, it is not a good idea to use all of your information from Wikipedia. It is, however, usually a great starting point. And that's what I think Rotten Tomatoes is. Rotten Tomatoes is a great way to start thinking about movies, to start looking at reviews, to see how people interact with a movie. It is a great starting point because there's a lot of information there. Beyond a tomato or a splat, you can look at how good people thought the movie was, you can see how many audience members liked the movie, you can actually see how many of those audience members' reviews were reviews of people that verified they actually went to go see the movie. Rotten Tomatoes is also a fantastic way for you to find critics. You could type in the name of a movie like Ad Astra and bam, all the critics that reviewed that movie, even if they're not on giant publications, even if they're on publications you have never heard of before, their opinions, their reviews are right there for you to read. There are people writing fantastic movie reviews. There are people with so much intelligence and nuance and insight into movies writing about film that don't live in New York and LA. They live in Albuquerque or Cleveland or Topeka, of all places. And now they're accessible to you because they're on Rotten Tomatoes, this website. It's a great way for you to scroll through reviews, and if you find a critic with whom you agree with their opinions most of the time, or you really respect the way they write or the way they come at things, you can now follow their entire work. However, and I must re-emphasize this, Rotten Tomatoes does not have the whole story. Think about a movie like Avengers Endgame. Biggest box office grosser of all time, right? Less than 500 critics reviewed it. Even if you look at the audience rating, how many millions of people saw Avengers Endgame? That is a small piece of the pie. It's substantial because the critics bring with them experience and knowledge about movies, but if you wanted to use that Rotten Tomatoes score as an example of how everybody felt about Avengers Endgame, you're misinformed. Just like that guy who was misinformed and reductive when he was talking about critics being ivory tower elites. Obviously didn't understand how Rotten Tomatoes works and how you should use Rotten Tomatoes responsibly. It's really just a tool. So if you're out there screaming to the high heavens that Rotten Tomatoes is rigged and Disney pays off the studios, that's not a responsible use. If you're review bombing a movie before it's even coming out on Rotten Tomatoes trying to get people not to go see it, that's an irresponsible use of the tool. So use it responsibly. Use it as your starting point. Use it as a way for you to find new critics that you respect. Use it to find reviews of movies that you don't think you'd ever be able to find otherwise. Use it as a database. Use it as a search engine. Use it as a way for you to broaden your knowledge about film in general. And do not stop at whether a movie has a tomato or a splat. But that's my time. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this little guide helps you out in the future. And if you want to keep learning and talking about movies with me, subscribe to the channel below. But right now, it is time for you to choose your own adventure between one of these videos. On the left is my review for Brittany Runs a Marathon, which I loved. And on the right is my collaboration with Subjective Cinema, where we fan cast the X-Men in the MCU. So, you've got a decision to make. Choose your own adventure, and I'll see you next time.